Because if you're managing change, you're already behind the power curve. You really want to be the one that's dictating the change when possible. Now, I got it. It's not always possible, but when it's possible, and if you're looking out into the future, thinking about that, then a lot of times you're going to be that person who's dictating the change.
Welcome to Rise and Stride, where we empower you to take your next step in an ever-changing business landscape. Here's your host, Denise LeDuc-Fremming, President and CEO of the California Society of CPAs.
Hello and thanks for joining us for another episode of Rise and Stride, where we bring together diverse voices to explore leading topics to help you navigate the seemingly ever-changing business landscape. Today, I'm very excited to have with us retired Lieutenant Colonel Oak McCulloch, who has used his 40-plus years of leadership in the U.S. Army and civilian positions to highlight principles that will benefit today's leaders and inspire the leaders of tomorrow. He's the author of Your Leadership Legacy, Becoming the Leader You Were Meant to Be, and an internationally recognized speaker who gives talks on a variety of topics, including leadership, success, history, college preparation, and others. Oak, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very excited to talk to you. I can't believe we have you on the podcast. So thank you, and thank you for your service. Appreciate that as well.
Yeah, well, thank you, Denise. It was an honor to serve the people of this country, and I love being able to be on shows like this so I can impart a little bit of some of the knowledge I've learned over the last 40 plus years. And my goal is always really simple. If we help one person be a little bit better leader or person, then we've accomplished what we've set out to do.
Oh, I love that. It's true, right? The one person that you can put out there, right, that's a great leader, just leads to other people, and it's kind of an exponential factor out there. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you and getting some of your insights so that it can help me down the road as well. So maybe we can start out, because we always like to ask our individuals that are on our show, what has really inspired you with your career and kept you moving to where you were in the military, and then you did food bank and you speaking. So you've taken a lot of different roads. What has led to you to take those different roads, or been curious?
Yeah, well, I think the main thing for me was the leadership piece of it. I was lucky. Even growing up, I had some great leaders. My high school basketball coach, Coach Terry Nitzwicki, who I still stay in contact with, and my high school history teacher, Mr. Charles Schindler, who I stayed in contact with until about 18 months ago when he passed away. And they kind of taught me that servant leadership is the style. I mean, that's the type of leaders they were. My basketball coach, his job was to put together a good basketball team, but he also understood his job was to create good young men who were going to be good husbands, good fathers, productive members of society. And then I had some great leaders in the Army who taught me the same lessons. And so when I got ready to leave the Army, I had no interest in getting into the corporate world, but I knew I wanted to still be a leader and influence, do some good as a servant leader, and that's why it led me to the food bank. And that was interesting, but and I think I made a difference there, and at least I hope I did. And then I ended up being a recruiter as a Department of the Army civilian, where I was helping young men and women become what they wanted to be, an officer in the Army. And then wrote my book, and now I'm out speaking, trying to make people just a little bit better leader than they are.
Yeah, leadership, I think, has sometimes people misunderstand it, right? They think leader is, oh, I get to be a leader now. I can bark orders, or I can tell people what to do, and they'll listen to me because I'm a leader. And I think that's so far from the truth. And you talk a bit about that in the servant leadership piece. Maybe you can give us some examples and how you've helped people move to the next level, so to speak.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Some people That's their idea of what leadership is. And if that's your idea of what leadership is, please go do something else because you're not going to be a good leader. I had my hand in commissioning, helping to commission over 600 lieutenants. So officers for the Army, leaders for this nation eventually. Um, and I used to tell every single one of them, leadership is about selfless service. It's not about you, and yet it's all about you. It's not about the title you get or the privileges you get or that you're going to make more money and live in a nicer house and drive a nicer car. Leaders get those things usually, and that's okay as long as that's not the only reason you want to be the leader. It is all about you and how you treat and empower the people and the organization that you have the privilege to lead. And it is a privilege to be the leader. And I think too many people today, too many leaders today have forgotten that it is a privilege, and we can see the results of that.
Yeah, it is a privilege and a commitment that when you say you're going to lead, right, that you take on. And, the servant leadership part, I think is maybe we can double down on that because for me, I know it was a year-long course and I did it with, it was, I think 10 different individuals, but it was all about servant leadership. And I can't even remember, your memory's better than me the names of teachers you had, but I can't remember the book we read, but it was all about servant leadership. And at that time, I remember people saying, oh, you're going to serve. Oh, it was, okay, that's nice, right? But I too think it's so important because you're taking on a responsibility where people are coming to you, right? And you're leading them and you have a responsibility and a commitment to help them get to where they want to be. And so maybe you could speak a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think, here's, I think, part of the problem is the term servant leadership. When I say that to some people, they say, well, I don't want people walking all over me. They think that that means you have to be always nice and kind to people. And you should be kind whenever you can and nice whenever you can. But being a servant leader means you are going to make people do things they don't want to do. It because you're going to do it for their best interest. One of the practices that I started a long time ago, every organization I took over, or as new people came in, I would kind of tell them, this is the culture, this is the vision and the plan, this is what I expect of you, I, the leader, expect from you, and this is what you can expect from me. And then I would pull out a sheet of paper and I'd put their name across the top. And I'd say, okay, where do you want to be 5 years from now? And they'd tell me, or if they know, we kind of figure it out where they wanted it to be. And I'd say, okay, what do we have to do to get you there? What training do I need to send you to? What positions of responsibility do I need to put you in? What seminars, conferences, whatever do I need to send you to? What's your education level that we need to get you to? And I'd write all those down. And every quarter, when I would do my quarterly counseling with them, I'd pull out that sheet of paper. I'd say, okay, where are we, Denise? And we say, okay, we've done this. Well, we haven't gotten you to this training yet. Let's figure out when we can get you there right now. Let's start trying to figure that one out. And then we just kind of kept track of that. And that shows them that you care about them not only as a worker, but you care about them as a person. And I think that's part of a job of a leader. And certainly that's one of the reasons I believe in servant leadership is because as a servant leader, it's your job to get them where they want to be, to make them the best person, best employee and person that they can be. And I think I take that very responsible.
No, I really appreciate that because it is the longer game. I think sometimes we tend to look at thinking a lot of things, the short game. And so you really don't, because I think you do have a responsibility to help people get to where they want to be, whether it's working with you or moving on to something else, right? I mean, that's part of the, populating the world with better leaders, like you said, one at a time. And so I had people help me, and I definitely need to pay that forward and help also.
Yeah, I have a friend, he owns a business and he's got a lady who's worked for him for 15, 17 years, and she wants to branch out and start her own franchise in that same business. And he was telling me, how he hates the loser and he doesn't want a loser. And I said, you're looking at this all wrong. You should be honored that she's going to move on and take over a franchise. That means you have done your job, and you'll train the next person who takes her place. And eventually, hopefully, she'll move on and take on a new franchise. That's our legacy. And obviously, I legacy means something to me, or I wouldn't title my book that. To me, legacy has two parts. A very, very, very small part of your legacy is what you actually accomplished as the leader of that organization. Now, that matters. In the real world, results do matter. But that's a very small part, because when you move on, when you leave that position, and you are going to leave that position one way or another, you're either going to quit, get fired, get promoted, or you're going to die. One way or another, you're leaving that position. When you move on and the next person takes over and they change everything, then what's your legacy? Your legacy is that next generation of leaders that you helped create, who then creates the next generation of leaders, who then creates the next generation. When I was running my Army ROTC program, my last assignment on active duty, where I was helping to create that next generation of leaders for the Army and the nation, a guy who worked for me, and I say he worked for me, he was probably a better leader than I was, Master Sergeant David Powell. One day we were sitting there talking about the significance of what we were doing, creating that next generation of leaders. And he looked over at me and he said, sir, great leadership handed down from generation to generation is what develops great nations. And I thought, wow, what a powerful quote. But you know what the most powerful part of that quote is, Denise? You can take that word nations and you can substitute anything you want for it. A business, a college, a university, a food bank, a hospital. It doesn't matter, because every organization, regardless of profession, needs good leadership if it wants to be successful.
And that's powerful. It really is, when you think about that. And I liked how you shifted the paradigm there, where you said, just be so grateful and honored that that person, they saw the success, right? And you helped them, and now they want to move on. So yeah, sometimes you just have to shift that in your mind. We all do hate to lose great people. That I have a number of great people, Aldo and Brenda, on this podcast being two of them, but I work with many, 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 the team. That's wonderful. And I know someday they all will leave. And so you just have to be ready for that, right? And prepare somewhat.
You do. And if you're doing it, if you're doing your job as a leader, right, and you hit it right on the head, being a leader has a responsibility. I tell people, if you do this leadership thing right, it is the hardest thing you will ever do. It is also the most rewarding thing you will ever do, because you get to see people that you helped develop, move on, and do bigger and better and greater things. But if you're doing this right, then you are preparing people to take someone else's job, including your own, but everybody in your organization. You need to be working toward who's going to take that position next and start developing them. And when because I talk about leadership development programs, that's one of the things I do, is I run leadership development programs for companies. And I always tell them, when you're thinking about leadership development and you're looking at your workforce, the people who work for you, then you ought to be looking at them in three categories. And they're real, it's really simple. Ready now, which means they can take over as a leader right now. If you needed them, they can step up into that role. Then you got ready later, which is, with a little more training, a little more experience, maybe 1 to 3 years, they'll be ready to step into a leadership position. And then you got ready future, those that you see potential in, but it's going to take a while to develop that potential, maybe 4, 5, 6 years to get them to the point where they're ready to be a leader. But if you start looking at people in those three categories, then you can start figuring out, okay, I really need to put some emphasis on this, so that in a year from now, he or she is going to be ready to step into a leadership position. Because again, you never know when somebody's going to get a better opportunity and going to leave. And that's okay. I tried to never stand in the way of somebody who was trying to increase their position in one way or another.
No, I mean, that's a sign, right? When you can, and I've had bosses that have given me job opportunities that weren't even at the organization. They're like, I know this is over there and you're ready, go. Right. So that is a testament, right, to really a great leader.
Yeah.
So,
Again, it's not about you. It's
it,
about them.
yeah, exactly. You're right. It's a hard job and it's a lonely job sometimes, but it is the most rewarding. Kind of feel sometimes like when I was I'm a parent. So that kind of reminds me of that. Um, just a there's I don't have to say this, this, but there's so much change out there that we're dealing with, and it seems like from a leadership perspective, the change is faster now than ever was. What do you see? And you talk about intentionality in your book. What should people lean into now, especially with the change, and how can they maybe think about things a little different that can help them navigate some of it?
Yeah. You're right. Change. I mean, that's the one constant in life, right? I mean, it's always going to be there. But I think you're right. In the business world, especially, it's moving faster and faster. And when I talk about change and managing change and leading through change, I try to emphasize a couple things. Number one, I think a leader's job, one of their jobs, is to have that vision, to be looking out into the future and thinking, okay, what are the things that are going to come down the pike that are going to affect me and my organization, and try to get ahead of that. Because if you're managing change, you're already behind the power curve. You really want to be the one that's dictating the change when possible. Now, I got it. It's not always possible, but when it's possible, and if you're looking out into the future, thinking about that, then a lot of times you're going to be that person who's dictating the change. And then I think as you're actually leading your organization through that change, I think there's a couple things you can do to help make it. It's going to be not fun for people in your organization. I mean, we're all creatures of habit. And anybody who tells you they're not is lying to you and themselves, because we are all creatures of habit. None of us like to change what we do because it's comfortable. And when we have to change, we get into that uncomfortable zone that none of us really like to be in, or at least not all the time. But I say there's a couple things. Number one, make sure that you identify what that change is really going to do to your organization and the people in your organization. I see lots of times people go off on tangents that only make it worse, not better. So define what that change is really going to be and how that's going to affect the people in your organization, and try to get down to the second and third order effect of how that's going to affect people. Then I think you got to be honest with people. You got to say, look, this is not going to be easy. This is going to be, we're going to make some mistakes. And when we do, we'll identify them. And that's your job, a lot of your job, because you're the ones implementing this. So if we're making a mistake, if it's not working, you got to be honest and come up and tell me so we can redirect what we're doing to make it better. Then you got to fix those things immediately. You got to be decisive if you're going to lead through change. If there's something wrong, you got to fix it then. Tackle those problems head on and do it as quickly as possible. That will keep people motivated. They'll say, yeah, we identified something that wasn't right. The boss fixed it right then. And I think the last piece that I think that I always tell people, and I think a lot of leaders make a mistake here, is involve the people who are going to make that change happen in the planning process, in the decision-making process. Call them in and say, hey, this is the problem we've got. Give me some ideas. And, one of the things I've found in my life is a couple things. Number one, when you do that, you start increasing the amount of trust they have in you, because you ask their opinion. You may not use their opinion this time, but at least you asked their opinion. Number two is I found that somebody I thought was my superstar will throw out some dumb idea. There are no dumb ideas, but not a good idea. And somebody who I thought was maybe my weakest link or the newest person in the organization will throw out some great idea. But that's the great thing. You're the leader. You get to decide what the good ideas are and what the bad ideas are. discard the bad ones and use the good ones. And generally what I have found is that I'll use a little bit of your idea, a little bit of my idea, and a little bit of somebody else's idea, and we'll put that together, and that's now the solution or the decision. And now it's not Colonel McCulloch's decision or solution, it's our solution or decision. And now they got a little skin in the game. Now they're going to work a little harder because they had some input in it. And the only reason leaders don't do that, or the main reason, in my opinion, is because of their ego. They think they're the leader. They got to make the decision. They got to be the one that comes up with the solution. Now, I'm here to tell you, I don't care how long you've been doing what you're doing. You don't have all the answers or the knowledge or the skills or the abilities. Use the knowledge, skills, and abilities of the people you have the privilege to lead.
It's funny you say. It reminds me of when I first took a management position. Someone told me, very smart person. It was actually, her name was Bernadette. I remember that. And she said, always hire people smarter than you. That was her one comment to me, because she said, at the end of the day, to your point, you need everyone coming up with solutions, not just yourself. Yeah.
My first job in the Army on active duty, I was a platoon leader. So I had 32 combat infantrymen I was leading. And my platoon sergeant, my second in command, the senior enlisted guy in my platoon, I showed up and they're already out on the range practicing and for a live fire event. And I showed up at lunchtime and he grabbed me by the shoulder, and I can see him like he's standing in front of me. He was 6'6", 220-pound country boy from Mississippi. And he grabs me by the shoulder and he says, "Sir, grab an MRE, let's go have lunch." And so we're over there sitting underneath a tree, eating lunch, eating an MRE. And he said to me, "Sir, you're the leader, you're the boss." He said, "We'll do things however you want to do them." He said, "However," I was 24-year-old lieutenant. He said, "I have been in the Army for 23 years. He had been in the Army almost as long as I'd been alive. Why would you not listen to him?" He said, "My job is to help make you a better leader. If you're about to mess up, I'm going to tell you. If you still want to do it that way, we'll do it that way." He said, "But my job is to let you know when you're about to make a mistake." And I'll tell you what, I give Sergeant First Class Benson a lot of credit for helping to develop me into the leader I became.
That's impactful. It is, because you really need to, take in what other perspectives. And I think sometimes, when you say it and you lay it out, it sounds simple, right? But to your point, people don't, it just seems like, why does it get so confused? Why do we have such problems? And maybe it is ego or trying to save face. I don't know, but it seems simple, right? But there's always such problems. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think here's the other part of it. You have to trust the people that will, not everybody. I know there's people out there. I think my philosophy is always, you start with trust, and then it's yours to lose. But I think when you're a leader, you got to develop trust in not just you, but in the organization. I always talk about 360-degree trust. And I think all of us would understand that the first thing about trust is the people that you lead have to trust you. If that one's not there, we can all go home. It doesn't matter because nothing's going to get done. But just as importantly, you have to trust the people you lead, that they're going to do the right thing, that they want to show up and do a good job. They're going to accomplish the things you ask them to accomplish. Then everybody in your organization has to trust each other, the guys or gals sitting on the left or on the right, that they're going to do the right thing, make good decisions, put in their effort, try to accomplish the goal of the organization. And then the last piece of that 360-degree circle is that the people outside your organization have to trust you, and you have to trust them, because nobody's going to do business with you if they don't trust you. And I hope you're not doing business with people you don't trust. And if any piece of that 360-degree circle is missing, you got some problems, and you need to fix that, because it all starts and ends with trust. Leadership is about people and trust, period. End of story. I believe that.
Yeah, trust is at the heart of it, right? It has to be. So maybe we can, because like I said before, and when we started, I could talk to you for hours, but we don't have that much time. Maybe you can talk a bit about communication because with the trust, right? Communication, and you had to communicate so clearly, right? Orders and everything that you've done. So I think that is a place where there's breakdown at times.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. That old saying, I can't remember who said it, but the 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 thing about communication, the problem with communication is that we believe that it happened. Because we all make that mistake. So there's a couple things, and leadership is the number one factor that will determine whether or not your organization has the capability of being successful. Communication is the number two factor, are easy. If an organization that doesn't communicate well isn't going to be successful, and a leader who doesn't communicate well is not going to be a successful leader. So I think you got to understand that, and that communication is a skill just like any other skill. None of us got on a bike and took off riding and never fell off. At least I don't think there's anybody who's ever done that. I fell off plenty of time. Fell off, got back on, rode a little bit further, fell off, got back on, rode a little bit further. Now I can ride a bike pretty much without falling off every once in a while. But it's a skill. Communication is no different than that. If you want to be a better communicator, then you have to practice it. And I tell people that all the time, and I speak to a lot of young men and women, and I always get somebody who comes up and says, well, Colonel McCulloch, I want to be a leader, but I can't communicate with people like you do. And I said, well, yeah, you can. I said, it's just going to take some practice to do it. I said, and you may embarrass yourself the first time, and that's okay. I tell this story, and it's a true story. When I took over my Army ROTC program at University of South Alabama in Mobile, I had 53 cadets in the program, and my goal was to get to 150 at the end of my 3-year tour there. And I knew if I wanted to do that, I had to recruit more than 50 miles around Mobile, Alabama. So I started recruiting nationwide. Well, I didn't have a budget that I could fly out to Seattle and talk to some young man or a young woman out there. So I started doing it over the phone. So I came up with this kind of script that I was going to use. And the first time I used it, I did it. I didn't realize my wife was in the room right next to me, listening to me. And I went through my script, told him all the benefits of Army ROTC, why our program would be a great fit for him and all this kind of stuff. Hung up the phone, and my wife walked in and said, "Hun, that was god awful. That kid is not coming to your program." And she was right. And so I worked on it. I kept getting better and better and better. And when I left that program 3 years later, I had 179 cadets in the program.
Wow. You exceeded your goal.
Yeah. So, but the point is that you can get better at communication. The second point about communication is it's got to be a two-way street. If you think being the leader and communicating is you getting up there barking orders and telling people what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, and not listening to them, then you're not a leader. At best, you're a boss, and at worst, you're a dictator. It's got to be a two-way street. That's the only way you get feedback on whether or not the things you are doing is working. Not only in making money or being successful in the business, but also in helping to create that next generation of leaders and better people. So it's got to be a two-way street. And then the other piece of it is that I think you got to have somebody like my wife, for me, who's not afraid to hurt your feelings and tell you when you're doing something wrong. There's got to be that open dialogue. I have a friend who does public speaking as well, and he hit one of his terms is that you want to encourage people to hold you responsible, to hold you accountable. You want, especially friends and good people that work for you, you want them to be honest with you. And if you don't have that, then you're going to do some dumb things. I promise you. You got to have that. I call them the Napoleon's corporal, somebody who's you can bounce ideas off of, and they can tell you if it's dumb or not. And you got to let them do that. You got to let them put you in a place of a positive, but being uncomfortable by telling you the truth. And if you don't have that, you're going to make some bad mistakes.
No, I believe that too. I call it my board, my personal board, right? But it's people that can tell me, my partner, like that wasn't great. I wouldn't do that, right? And I do. I have those individuals, and it's to your point, it's really important because we don't know. And a lot of times you don't know how you sound or what you're communicating if it makes sense. And so yeah, there's always work to do. Always work to do.
Always, always. And there's always, you think it's a good idea. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing it or saying it. But that doesn't make it so. That doesn't make it true. We all make mistakes. There's nobody's perfect in this world. I keep trying to convince my wife I am. You would think after 39 years I could do that, but no.
Oh,
We're
we need
all,
another 39.
yeah, maybe. We're all going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Uh, but what we got to do is make as few mistakes as possible, and a good way to do that is to bounce things off people that you trust to tell you the truth when you're about to do something dumb, like Sergeant First Class Pinson used to do for me. One day I walked into the office and I said, I'd been there about a month, and I walked into the office and I said, you know what, Sergeant Pinson, this is what I'm going to do. And he said, you really want to do that, sir? I said, well, maybe not.
Did you not do it?
I didn't. I said, well, give me we got to do this. Then give me another way to do it. And he gave me a couple ideas, and I used one of them, and it worked.
Wow. Yeah, it's powerful, right? Powerful. So you talk a lot about results, and I think, results, outcome, we talk about a lot. You can, spin your wheels and, work 110 hours a day, and if nothing happens, nothing happens. So talk to us a little bit about the results and the outcomes, how important that is. And the CPAs are all aligned with that, results and outcomes.
Yeah. Well, like I said, in the real world, results do matter. Maybe in fantasy land where everybody's a winner and everybody gets a trophy, maybe not. But in the real world where we all work, and people's lives and livelihood depend on us, then results matter. You can do everything. We could bring 1,000 leadership people in here. They can teach you everything that they know about leadership, and you can do it all perfectly. But if you don't get results, it really doesn't matter, because that's how you're going to be judged in the end. Was your organization successful at whatever that is? And if it wasn't, then you weren't as good a leader as you could have been. So I think, there's a couple ways to go about getting results. I think number one is you got to build a culture. That everything in your organization should revolve around the culture that you want that organization to be. Then you got to come up with your vision and your plan. And those three things have to be tied together. They have to be intertwined, or you're going to have problems. And the way I look at it is, the vision is where I want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, a month from now, whatever time frame that is. The plan is how we're going to get there, the things we're going to do on a daily basis to get us to that location. And the culture is who you are along that journey, or along that plan. And they have to be tied together, because I see people all the time, and you can even do this for your own personal life. I see people get where they want to be, or their organization gets where they want to be, but they don't like who they are when they get there, because they didn't stick to their culture. They didn't stick to their values. And so I think you got to come up with that, and everybody in your organization needs to know what the vision is, what the plan is, and they need to know what the culture is, and what, their sandbox that they can play in. This is who we are. In everything we do, this is who we are. This is how we want to be recognized. And if you can get people to do that, stay inside that sandbox, and they know the vision and they know the plan, not only the plan, but they're part of the plan. Because if they don't know they're part of the plan, then how can they help you? They got to know what their part of that plan is. So again, that goes to communication. You got to communicate that down to people. And then I think that the other piece of being successful is to develop the right mindset in your organization. You got to have that winning attitude, that we're going to win. I want to win at everything I do. I don't care if I'm playing old maid with my 12-year-old granddaughter. I want to win. Okay. And you got to have that desire. Now, we're not going to win every time, but you got to have that desire to win. And, Vince Lombardi. And again, I grew up in Northern Illinois, Chicago Bears fan, so you know
Yes, I do.
how hard it is for me to quote Vince Lombardi. But what a great quote. Winning is not a sometimes thing, it's an all the time thing. Winning is a habit. Unfortunately, so is losing. And if you are put in charge of an organization that isn't successful, that isn't making its mission, that isn't doing the things it's supposed to do, then you got to break that habit. And the only way to do that is to develop that winning attitude in people. My father had a saying when I grew up, as I was growing up, he called it his 75% rule. And he said, son, if you can't do something better than 75% of the people doing it, then you need to do one of two things. Figure out how to get better at it, or go find something else to do because it obviously doesn't matter to you. And I lived that rule growing up, and I passed it on to my kids, and I'm passing it on to my grandkids. And I think that attitude that you're going to be the best at whatever you do, and you're probably never going to be the best at whatever you do, but that desire to be the best at whatever you do, that you never stop trying to get a little bit better, is the key to getting results, not only as a person, but in an organization.
Yeah, it's that striving, right? That striving for that next level. I know I grew up too with if you can't do the job well, then don't do the job at all. It was
That's
like,
right.
that was
Well,
my dad was,
and I think the final piece of that result piece for me is the reflection piece. I think that we don't do a good job of doing that, not only as a person, but certainly as organizations. And the Army kind of drilled that into me. We had these things called after action reviews. You can call them whatever you want. But after we did an event, we would sit down, everybody involved, and we'd say, ask 3 questions. What were we supposed to do? What did we do? How can we get better at it? And even if you were successful at whatever you were doing, that doesn't mean you can't get better at it. So what were we supposed to do? What did we do? And how can we get better at it? And the what did we do piece of it, think of it in 3 different categories. What do I need to stop doing? What didn't work that I need to stop doing? What do I need to start doing? A way to fix what went wrong. And what do I need to continue doing? The things that did go well that we want to continue to do. If you think of them in those 3 categories, then it becomes a little more clear for you. But you have to reflect. I get people all the time who tell me, well, Colonel McCulloch, I learned a lot from that experience. And I said, no, you don't learn very much from experiences, because experiences are full of emotions. We don't learn very well from emotions. And the things we do learn usually is not the right thing we wanted to learn from emotions. We learn from the reflection on that experience. What did we do? What were we supposed to do? What did we do? And how can we get better at it?
I love that. I wrote that down. That's really good. And your comment on the experiences are full of emotion, so it's the reflection. I never
Yeah.
really thought about
And we all have emotions. I mean, we're human. At least I hope we all have emotions. But you got to understand that, and that emotions are going to they're going to take you down side tracks because it's personal, and you got to take that piece out of it, because that's the other piece of reflection. Is you got to be brutally honest. If you're not honest, reflection doesn't mean anything. Then you're just going down the emotion piece of it. But if you take the emotions out of it and you're honest and you really look at it, and not to assign blame, to figure out what went wrong, why it went wrong, and how can we fix it so that next time it doesn't. Then I think you'll see your organization improve vastly. And I think you should do an after action, a reflection after every major event that you do, or anything that was important should have a reflection at the end of it with everybody who was involved in it, whether it was the decision making, the actual doing of it, or the logistics piece of it. Whatever piece, whoever was involved should be involved in that reflection.
Mm-hmm. When would you just quickly, when would you say, like, you do that reflection? Is it important to be done day after,
As soon as possible. Yep.
Okay.
Well, it's all still fresh in your mind. Because the longer you go, the less detail people are going to remember. And it might be that small little detail that somebody doesn't remember that was the cause of the problem, that caused it all to go the wrong way. And if they don't remember it, then you're not going to pick up on it.
Like that. It reminds me of when I say I have to sleep on it. Because I always, there's something important, I have to like reflect, I have to think about it, right? And sleep on it, take some time.
Right.
So I like that. You had so many good things. I took a lot of notes, Oak. So a lot of notes here, improvements. But I really liked when you said communication, when you believe it happened, because I think that is key so many times, right? You
Absolutely.
spewed out there.
How many times, anybody in your audience, now be honest, how many times have you given somebody a project, given them everything they need to get it done, they go away, they come back with it, and they hand it to you, and you say, yeah, that's not what I asked for. How many times did that happen? I promise you, most of the time, that is exactly what you asked for. It is not what you wanted, but that is what you asked for, because we didn't do a good job. We weren't concise, succinct, and easily understood when we assigned that project.
I think it happens a lot of times.
It
So
does.
it's yeah, it's a good reminder. And you had plenty of great insights here. And I like I said, I could talk to you much longer, but I know our time is up.
I'm always happy to come back on, Denise.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that as I'm listening to you. What else can we ask Oak to do? So, just really appreciate you sharing your insights and your experiences with us. I've learned a lot. I know our listeners have learned a lot. And so, thank you so much for being with us.
I appreciate it, Denise. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Go enjoy your day. Take a walk. I think that's what you're going to do maybe on the beach.
Yeah.
But thank you. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. And we look forward to our next conversation that we'll have.
Rise and Stride is produced by the California Society of Certified Public Accountants. To learn more, visit calcpa.org.